Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of PD and PDubs Unscripted here on Monday, March 7th. Hard to believe that. PDubs, how's it going?
Real good, PD. Good to be with you again. Good to be with everybody on this wonderful Monday. Hope you're enjoying a great beginning of your week.
Right, and hopefully you were blessed by worship services over the weekend and just had an opportunity to spend time with your Lord.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're just kicking into the season of Lent, so it's a really important time in our faith walk in the church. So hopefully you're connecting with your church or in God's Word a little bit differently as you approach the coming of Christ's death on the cross and Easter.
Right, as we focus on that journey that Christ is making to the cross. And to me, that's always one of those humbling things. You think about what was going on his mind in those days leading up to that, because he knew what was ahead of him.
Yeah, for sure. And he did it with great intentionality.
So good times always talking about that. But on Mondays, as you know, we always do faith intersections and talk about where we see our faith intersecting with our everyday life. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And today kind of talking about, because we're recording this on Ash Wednesday. So Pastor, you have a little ash on your forehead there.
Yeah, you do too. You got like a little smudge there on your forehead.
Yeah.
Did you fall down or?
No, mine I hear looks like a cross. Yours I hear looks like a circle.
Yeah, so Ash Wednesday over here at Emmanuel, we provide an opportunity for people to receive ashes imposed on their forehead or on the back of their hand, whatever their preference, just to remind them of their own sinfulness, their own mortality. And as we do it in the shape of a cross, it reminds us that Christ saved us for eternally.
Right, and so, growing up, I always thought of Ash Wednesday and the imposition of ashes as something done in the Catholic Church.
Yeah, me too. Even growing up here at Emmanuel, it has not always been a tradition. But over the course of the last, 25 years or so, it's kind of become that.
Right. I mean, I think back to when I worked at Jewel, and you'd see people coming in on Ash Wednesday, and some with the ashes on, some without, and I was like, okay, that's a Catholic thing.
Oh, then there's all the Catholic folks.
There, they went to Mass there this evening.
Yeah, for sure.
Or sometime today, and so... But it brings up that interesting kind of idea, what we wanted to get at today, that idea of, like, in a sense, wearing your faith on your sleeve. So it's kind of obvious because people know why people have ashes, I would assume, on Ash Wednesday on their forehead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we do this once a year, and it is kind of, like, startling. Like, if you're out in the community, like you say, when you were working at Jewel, you obviously quickly take note of someone with a big old, smudge on their forehead.
Right, and it's like, oh, what are they doing?
Yeah, so you feel like subconscious as the person who notices it, like you're kind of drawn to it immediately.
Right, and you don't want to stare at it.
Yeah, you don't want to stare, so you look away. So maybe when you were doing the cashiering, you probably were like, oh, I don't want to like stare at it or overly stare.
Or even, probably even at that point as a high schooler, not even want to do like, well, I don't even want to bring up like, well, why do you have that? Not wanting to almost engage in that faith-based conversation, even though I was a Christian.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I know, even speaking from my own experience, as I was growing up and receiving ashes, even into adulthood, you as the one receiving it, and you go outside and you kind of greet people, and you see, they're kind of like they're looking at you, and so you kind of feel a little self-conscious,
right? And so this is just one of the many ways that sometimes people identify themselves as a Christian out and about in the public, whether you're wearing a shirt for your church that you attend or some sort of Christian shirt or a cross necklace or even having like a bumper sticker on your car.
And the old fish bumper sticker.
The old fish bumper sticker. And it just kind of opens up maybe a conversation that you feel comfortable with, or maybe you get uncomfortable with that conversation.
Yeah. Well, even around here, friends, as we've been talking about our emphasis on the one, where we're trying to find someone in our life who's not walking with the Lord and or who doesn't know Him, that we walk with faith alongside them in their lives and just intersect with them. We have some Logo One merch, right?
Right. Yeah, thanks to Sophie, who was on a previous podcast. Her and I worked together about getting together some hats, some polos, some hoodies, some, I guess baseball hats and winter hats, a little of both. And so that kind of puts you out there when you wear that. It's a pretty obvious thing, like especially with the hoodies because the logo's pretty big on the back. And the baseball hat, that's what you see is, like a church logo with a cross and it says the one. But it does open up conversations. I know we had this, one of our members talked about that when we gave out those plastic silicone bracelets.
Oh, right.
For that was
150th anniversary.
150th. Yeah, and I was thinking backpacks, blessings, and barbecue.
Oh, that too. Yeah.
But we gave those out, and then somebody said, "Oh, it opened up a conversation at their job because they were asking about that." And that's one of those things. Like when you're out in the public, whether you're working, shopping, whatever you might be doing, attending an event, you don't know who around you is a Christian. But when you have that identifier, whether it is one merchandise or something that says Emmanuel or whatever church, or that you're a Christian, it kind of opens up that door to those around you. Like, okay, this person's a Christian, and you as a Christian wearing that stuff, you don't know where everybody else necessarily stands.
Yeah, and like our logo merch for the hats, the ball caps, and the knit hat are pretty cool looking. They got a nice, crisp logo on it, and I think both of us we've been wearing our hats here and there, and our sweatshirts and all that. Have had opportunity where people have noticed that.
Right. I had two examples of that going to Phoenix on the same day when we went to Best Practices a couple of weeks ago. I was wearing the hat traveling to Phoenix at the airport, and I was dropping off my luggage. That was a check bag, and the clerk at the desk was like, "Oh, that's a really neat hat." And so I was like, yeah, it's part of the church I'm a pastor at, or maybe belong to. I don't remember what I said exactly.
Yeah.
It's our concept of, everybody has that one person and they need to walk with Jesus and that try to get them closer to Jesus. And they're like, well, I'm a believer too. They talked about what church they were a member at and talked about maybe some of the issues that was there. But I was like, okay, you wasn't expecting that.
Yeah, yeah.
And then later that day when I was hiking up Camelback Mountain with my sister-in-law, at one point, we got done kind of taking a little bit of a break. I needed a little bit of a breather and a little water break. And this guy's like, I'm a believer too. I like your hat.
Cool.
And so we had a brief little conversations. But it's that little bit of that putting you out there, so to speak, that you don't know how people are going to respond.
Right, right. Yeah, I've had not as much interaction with you. The first time I wore my hat, I went to a gas station, and the manager there, he noticed my hat, and he had a Sox hat on.
Good hat.
And he had a Sox hat on, and
I like how you just ignored my comment. That's fine.
But he said to me, he goes, "Hey, nice hat," and I did say to him, I said, "Oh, thanks," and I said, "You too." Well, nice hat, you too. See, I can do that. I can be nice, to Sox fans.
I can be nice to Cubs fans.
You think so?
Yeah. I was nice to Cubs fans.
Yeah, you were. You went all the way to Milwaukee with me, so
Yeah.
I should be, happy with that.
But again, you're a little better maybe because you did wear a Sox hat, I think, at a Sox game.
I think I wore a Sox hat and a Sox. No, it was just a Sox hat at the game.
Yeah, the shirt was the Halloween trunk or treat.
Yeah.
But I also wore Ernie Banks jersey.
Yes, you did. I was proud of you.
Well, at that point, at least Ernie Banks I can get behind and respect.
But, so people, do take notice of these things. And, one of my friends from Fort Wayne when I was in the seminary, he had a different way of, you were talking about like people got bumper stickers, people have crosses, people have hats, whatever. He had a tattoo made of him for himself that talked about his faith. And it was on the inside of his wrist, right at the base of his palm. And it was a UPC code. And you ought to know this as a former checkout guy at the Jewel. You just scan it across.
Or you could type in the numbers if it doesn't scan. I know which numbers you got to key in.
Okay. Well, speaking of the numbers, the part where the numbers are on the UPC code, he had the number 1 and then COR 6:20.
Okay.
And so that is a scripture verse that says, for you were bought with a price, so glorify God in your body.
And that's 1 Corinthians 6:20.
That's right. Is that what I said?
Well, you didn't say you just said what the numbers were.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
So just for those listening.
Yeah, that's 1 Corinthians 6:20. And so it's a conversation starter. And, it's not like, something that's just blasting out. It just, whenever he opens up his hand and somebody sees the tattoo, someone will say, hey, that's pretty cool. Well, why do you have a UPC code on there? And
right.
So he can use that in a way to share his faith, and he does. So I thought that was pretty clever.
Right, that's a good, unique way to do it, and there's all those different ways. And now, for those listening, maybe think about this question: like, is that awkward? Do you feel awkward in those situations when you are placed where you're kind of putting yourself out there, not knowing how people are going to respond? Or there's that other idea of like thinking about, well, am I being a good example, a witness to my faith?
Yeah.
Like the whole bumper sticker thing. Like, I don't know if I've ever shared this story with you. I know I've shared with some people. I remember when I was at my first congregation, I was driving to St. Louis, which was about an hour and a half drive, and I was on the road, like 50, and it was like a 2-lane road, so you had to go into the other side to pass the car in front of you, whatever. And I was driving, and the person in front of me was kind of driving a little slow, and I was just like, oh, man, I don't want to be driving behind this person the whole way. I'm going to open up and, boom, just speed on right past them.
Yeah.
And then as I got a little closer, I was like, oh, this is somebody from the church, because I recognized the license plate.
Oh, no.
And at that point, I had a sticker for our church on the back windshield of the back window of my car. So I was like, I cannot pass this person right now, because I think sometimes people kind of know the pastor's cars because they're at the church a lot. And then having a sticker of the said church on my back window, I was like, I can't pass this person, because what would that look like?
Yep.
The pastor speeding on by and passing you. Thankfully, they turned off not too far past that. I think going into the town of Breeze, maybe. I can't remember.
Yeah.
But I was just like, oh, man. And so it's that kind of like the law kind of getting you, like, I got to be a good example here.
Yeah, for sure. And that'll get you. I had a similar experience, but not with any kind of like logo or anything. But it was on my day off, and I went to the doctor for something, I can't remember what, and I don't like going to the doctor. I'll just admit it.
Well, who does?
Yeah, right. So I finally got to that point in my pride that, all right, I need to go to the doctor. I will go to the doctor. So I get there and I fill out all the stuff, and there's people coming in after me, and it's starting to crowd, and well, everybody's getting called in except for me. And I'm like, okay, well, you begin to take notice, like, well, I was in here before that person and that person. And so this is like a walk-in clinic, and then obviously they have people who have appointments. So I just kind of thought, well, they must have had an appointment. Well, after about like half an hour of, seeing maybe a couple cycles of people going through, I began to get a little perturbed.
Really?
Yeah, me. And so I went up and I said, I've been waiting, like a half an hour. And, oh, yeah, sir, that we're just backed up today. And, just be patient for us, please. Okay, so I sat back down. And so I waited another 20 minutes. And now I'm, it's building up inside of me. And I'm really getting angry, and I'm like, this is it. I'm just going to go up there and just let her know that this is wrong, And so I go up to the thing, and she goes, yes, sir. I go, I've been waiting here 50 minutes, and I just get that out of my mouth, and I'm ready to just launch, right, and just give it to her. And so all of a sudden, I feel this tug on my pant leg, and it's a child. And I look over and I see this child, and I see this person looks up to me and says, hello, Pastor. And I look down and I'm like, oh, I recognize you. It's one of the kids from our church. And right next to her's her mom. And I'm like, hi, how are you? And like, just put on the smiley face, and I'm good. I'm happy. And then, and then I just turned to the lady. I said, whenever, you can let me in, that'd be great. I appreciate it. And I sat back down with my tail between my legs, man, because, like, God caught me right there.
Because who knows? And that's the thing. You never know the witness you're setting and who's around you. I had a similar, not a little bit like that, where a few months ago I was having issues with my iPhone. So I was like, okay, I'm going to go to the Apple store, because I couldn't figure out what was going on. And I was like, usually I can kind of get a good idea and do the basic things that I know if I go to the Apple store, they're going to tell me, hey, do this. Have you tried this? Yeah, I can do that. I can Google. I'm somewhat tech savvy. I kind of know what I'm doing. So sometimes, when I go there, I can maybe get a little like, yes, I've tried that. Yes, yes, I'm not that stupid. It's kind of basic. I got this. So I go there. The person's working on my phone and looking at it. All of a sudden, they're like, oh, I like your wallpaper. Because at the time, my wallpaper was the One logo. Because I was like, yeah, it's a cool logo. Let's just put on the phone something different, change it up. I was like, oh, yeah, it's part of something in my church I'm working at. We're doing this concept and explain the One a little bit. And they're like, oh, well, what church are you a pastor at? I'm like, Emmanuel Lutheran in Palatine. And they're like, oh, my neighbor works there and goes there.
Oh, wow.
And I was just like, oh, well, who's your neighbor? And they said, I was like, oh, yes, I see that person all the time. And I was like, going back through my mind, like,
how did I react?
How did I treat? Was I friendly? Was I kind? Was I a good example for this person? Because you never know where somebody's at in their faith walk. And if they see you being like a jerk and you are open about your faith, what person's going to say, that's the church I want to go to? Especially that person knowing I'm a pastor saying, he was a jerk. That's the church I want to go to.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, I think like on the weekends or on the day off, like whenever I'm going around town, sometimes I've got so much like T-shirts, especially in the summer, like from Emmanuel, like walkathon days or field days or the basketball community or whatever. And invariably, they'll have a scripture reading on the back. And I always forget about that. And so I just, you begin to wear all these like clothes that have some reference to God or Christ, and you kind of forget. And there's been a couple times where I'm like, somebody said something about, oh, I like the verse on your back. And I thought, oh man, I forgot I had a verse on there. I better like check down my behaviors. Kind of like that. It's a good reminder. And, there's points where I don't even think about what I'm wearing, but it is a good call to remember who you are, no matter where you're at. We should be loving no matter where we're at all the time.
Right. It shouldn't be like, oh, I'm wearing something that says I'm from Emmanuel or that I'm a Christian. I better be mindful of my actions. That should be our mindset 24/7 of like, oh, I need to be mindful. Even if the person doesn't realize I'm a Christian or not, that loving our neighbor as ourselves doesn't say only when people know you're a Christian. We should always do that.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's not always easy.
For sure. And especially in these times, I mean, when you go to a place like a restaurant or maybe even like a drive-through, you go to Burger King or whatever, and you're in the line a little longer than normal. And, a lot of times people don't have the number of coworkers in their store as they usually do. And so just kind of being mindful of that, kindness goes a long way. And there, whether, like you said, whether you're wearing a necklace or whatever, a hat with a logo or whatever, it is a good reminder for us all the time just to be patient, loving, and kind,
Right, because, I think too, like times, like to me, one of the worst experiences in a drive-through, and I won't name the fast food place in Palatine, but
okay.
Probably by my...
I think I remember this story.
Yeah, but based on the description, people, if they go there, might know what I'm talking about, because it's a place here in Palatine that once you're in the drive-through, you are kind of stuck in said drive-through. There's no like escape route. Like if you go to like the McDonald's here in town, if it's long, it's easy to get out of there.
Okay.
But this one, once you're in it, you're kind of stuck in there.
Now you got me thinking. I don't know which. I have to keep thinking here.
If you look on my desk right now in my office, you'll see a cup from this place.
Okay.
I was in the drive-through for like 40 minutes before they even got to the speaker to call.
Wow.
Up, like to give them my order. I was just like, this is horrible.
Yeah.
This is supposed to be fast food, but it was one of those like, not that I was obviously like voicing my frustration, but it shows like their lack of employees or whatever that they couldn't do everything. But it's still one of those like, it could be a hard where it's like, you might want to lay on the horn or like get out of your car and be like, what's taking you guys so long? But that's that being patient as you're talking about. And I don't know if this was drilled into you in seminary, but it was for us, patience and tact. That you gotta be patient and tactful. That was like something one of our professors would always like hammer into us. Patience and tact. Patience and tact.
It's a good lesson.
Right.
Yeah.
And so like that patience, even in that type of situation, because that was completely out of my control. And And I was like, man, I made the wrong decision. I should have gone to a similar style fast food place on the way home that night instead of this one.
Right.
Even though the other place was a little more out of my way to drive to.
Yeah, and that reminded me of something else too, like, between how we act out in the community versus how we act at home. And, like we could have our logo gear or, our bumper stickers or crosses or even tattoos and, sweatshirts and all this and that. And, as we're talking about, we're trying to be mindful of how we act out in the community. And so as people we don't even know would see us and encounter us, they see, oh, this person's kind of loving and kind, patient and kind. But how often do we, when we get home around our loved ones, we're not that at all. And we kind of really let our guard down. And to the people that we love the most, we don't give them the same kind of treatment and love. We kind of just, maybe something, snaps in our mind that's an irritant, and then we just fire off on, an unfortunate, unkind words.
Right. And it kind of reminds me, last night I was watching an episode of How I Met Your Mother, and they talked about the chain of screaming or the circle of screaming. That it was the concept of you get yelled at, so now you're going to yell at somebody else because you got yelled at, and it's this whole like chain of screaming. And I was like, I wonder if that really is a true concept, that because you get yelled at because maybe you did something wrong or something out of your control, so you're then put in a bad mood.
Yep.
So then you're going to take it out on the next person that does you wrong. So then that person then takes it out onto the next person.
Yeah.
And if I think, because I dozed off watching the episode, I mean, I've seen it before, but it's been a while since I last saw that episode. But if I remember correctly, it was like the person that yelled at the character Marshall, it was that person got yelled at, or their kid was in a bad mood because their teacher yelled at them, and it was Marshall's wife or something was the teacher that kind of got on the kid's case or something like that. So you just see how it cycles through. And I was like, I think there is some maybe truth behind it.
I think there's a lot of truth in that for sure. And I could see that happening quite a bit, but I've never thought about like, okay, if I'm short with someone or I like, unkind comment, then they'll do that to someone else and and so on and so on. So it just keeps going. Yeah.
Keeps perpetuating. And so it's that idea of like that patience and that love and kindness. And even for like us, when we are out there wearing our Christian logos, or just even like you said at home, we don't know the other person's day, or even people don't know the day we've had. Even if like, I'm wearing an Emmanuel shirt, maybe I did have a bad day.
Yeah.
And then that frustration just creeps in, and then it does set that bad example. But it's important to remember, you know what? This person that I may want to take my frustration out, they have nothing to do with what I'm angry or frustrated or annoyed about. And so I shouldn't take them out. I shouldn't. But it's also hard because then you're bottling those emotions up.
Yeah.
And then that's when it like bursts over maybe at home, because you're like, okay, at home I can be myself, but in the public I have to show a different personality possibly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think of like, the apostles when Jesus told them, you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and to the ends of the earth. And I wonder if they had bad days. Obviously they did, because that's the beauty of the Bible. It does show like when they had their not so good moments.
Right.
And that's helpful for us when we have those times. But was James or Peter or John, ever kind of, short with the receptionist at the doctor's office in Jerusalem?
Right. Or how was Thomas, after he almost got chided a little bit by Jesus, like, you believe because you see, blessed are those. And see, Thomas, because he probably felt humiliated, like, oh, Jesus.
Yeah, called me out.
He really called me out, like, oh, he wants me to actually put my finger in where he was nailed to the cross, even though that's what I kind of said.
Yeah, but I said it, and I know the other guys think it. I just said what they thought.
Right. So, like, did he leave that room and then, like, take out his frustrations on somebody else? Like, oh, I can't believe he called me out. Or is this like, well, it is Jesus, so how can I be mad at Jesus for calling me out for something I know I did?
Well, I mean, think about it. People even now get mad at God, Right. So I could see it. We're human beings, and we have emotions and feelings and things like that. But thankfully, Jesus always used those things as really excellent teaching tools. And
Right. You saw that with Peter when he's like, feed my sheep, restoring him after the denial.
yeah,
And even that, you think, oh, would Peter feel that guilt and that weight removed after that? Hopefully he did. But I almost, maybe because of the way my personality is, I'd almost feel like, oh man, he has called me out. He asked me this 3 times and just kind of put him in a little bit of a ditter.
yeah, yeah. So, like, as we're talking about these outward signs that we place on ourselves, we wear, or, like with the ashes and, like Ash Wednesday is just for a day. Is this something that helps us to be mindful each and every day? And we're hoping that maybe this kind of conversation just brought to light, some of everyone's behavior, our own, as Pastor and I were even sharing. Maybe you have some instances that are, a little humbling, or yet in the rearview mirror, maybe a little funny,
Right. And kind of what we were just talking about Jesus, it's a teaching moment of like, you know what? I need to just kind of keep my emotions in check and just go with the flow.
Yeah. You've heard this story before. I won't tell the whole thing, but when my kids were small, we were driving in Minnesota. They wanted to get some Hardee's, and I'm like, well, we're on our way to our friends. We'd get something to eat there. No, we're starving. So, all right, you're going to get fries and a drink, and, you can't eat because they're making dinner. So we go through, and, a car full of kids, you get the order, and then, I get through it, and because the ordering is not always the easiest. Everybody's got to take their time and think, even though it's just fries and you got to figure out the drink. So we get through, and I'm already in a rush, and somebody goes, I didn't get my drink. Okay. So drive the van around the thing again. I should have just gone inside, but I went through, and yeah, we didn't get our drink. We didn't get, okay, what was it? Okay, it's an orange or something. I can't remember. So we get it. Okay, got it. And then we pull out, I didn't get my fries. Like, oh, you're kidding me. So I go around again and get the fries. Now I'm like really getting agitated, and I pull out, and one of the kids goes, I wanted orange, not root beer. And so then I was like, I lost it, and I slammed my fist on the steering wheel, and my horn of my van just blasting, and it was stuck. And I'm like, oh no. And I'm like, what in the world? This is crazy. Everything's going wrong, So me, who tries to fix things in a car, I know how to take, turn a horn off. There's got to be some wire underneath the dash. So I go under the dash, upside down, my head in there, and I'm looking for things, and I'm hearing this blasting horn going. And I'm like, oh, this is no good. This is no good. And all of a sudden, someone's tapping me on my leg, and I'm like, who's bugging me? Is what is going on in my head.
One of the kids.
So I launch out from underneath the dash, and there's a person standing there, and I scream, what? And this man, who I didn't know was standing there with his eyes wide open, and he kind of stepped back a little bit. And I said, oh, I'm so sorry. I thought you were my wife. And so I was begging him, I'm like, please forgive me. And meanwhile, I'm doing all this. The horn is still going. And he goes, yeah, I just thought I'd come and see if I could help you. And so we go and open up the hood, and we're looking underneath the hood, and I just was mortified. I'm apologizing. I'm like, yeah, I don't know. This got me so over the edge. And all of a sudden it stopped. I'm like, how did it stop? And so Sam, who was probably like 11 at the time, he kind of did what I did. He took his foot and he kicked the steering wheel, and it stopped. And so the guy goes, and I kept, I'm so sorry. Oh, that's okay. It's okay. It's okay. So somewhere in Minnesota is a man who will never, ever help someone else again at the Hardee's drive-thru because of my behavior.
Right.
Oh, man.
So it's one of those things, like looking back, we can laugh at something like that.
Yeah.
But it's also kind of it's kind of one of those things like, I need to learn from this and set a good example, not just for that man, but in that case, even
my kids.
Yeah. And it's just one of those hard things. That's where our sinful human nature comes out.
Yep.
But thankfully, God still forgives us.
Yeah.
And he gives us other opportunities that we can set a good example and put a positive light to maybe somebody that doesn't have a positive spin on Christianity.
Yeah. And the true story is like later on, after I calmed down, my wife and kids were like, "Dad, we were laughing at you. You were just going crazy." Like, so I'm like, there was nothing to laugh about at the time.
Not a laughing
Not a laughing matter.
As now you're like dying of laughter sharing it.
Exactly. So, but anyway, hopefully that man will help others, and I haven't ruined him for life.
But yeah, so now you see a little bit of faith intersections in our everyday life, and I'm sure you guys all have stories like that. But it's that reminder of, doing what God has called us to, loving our neighbors, even when we are kind of frustrated or annoyed, but still put that best foot forward.
Yeah. Well, thanks for joining us today. We hope that you have some really great faith intersections in your daily life, and we hope that our discussion today helped you out a lot.